Classical Conversations presents Refining Rhetoric with CEO Robert Bortons, a podcast where faith, business, politics, and classical education meet. Join us as we use the classical tools of rhetoric to seek truth in every arena of life.
Hello and welcome back to another exciting episode of Refining Rhetoric. Today, my guest is Timothy Knotts. He is part of the Classical Conversations development team, longtime Classical Conversations father, former lawyer. He lives in Windsor, Connecticut with his wife, Cynthia, and their 4 proteges. He's also the co-founder of the New England Consortium for Classical Education. He's a Circe Institute master teacher, a recovering attorney, and an amateur poet. And recently, Timothy authored Reasoning Together Philosophy, which is coming to market this spring, 2025. And he occasionally is published on Circe and Kepler blogs and the Consortium Journal. So, Timothy, welcome to the show.
Hey, glad to be here, Robert.
So, tell us, how did you get into classical education?
Well, long story, but I'll make it short for you. My wife is a Suzuki violin teacher, and she got invited to visit CC campus when our oldest child was still just under 4 years old, I think. And she walked into Foundations and said, "Yeah, this is what I want to do. This is completely fits with what I understand about the way education works." And I said, "Sounds good. I'll write you a check." um, and then I went to visit a Challenge B class because they invited me to come in and talk about what it means to be a lawyer to get ready for mock trial. And I said, "Well, while I'm here, can I hang around and see what else you do aside from mock trial?" And they said, "Sure." So I came home after a couple hours of Challenge B and said to my wife, "This is what we're doing with our kids all the way through. No questions asked." And she said, "I wasn't asking any questions." So here we are.
Nice. Now, you are the co-founder of the New England Consortium for Classical Educators. What is that, and what are you all trying to accomplish up north in the great white?
Yeah, the Great White Cold this time of year. So several of us started the consortium together a few years back because up here there aren't a lot of Christians in general. We're a pretty bleak place to live as far as church population goes. There are even fewer classical-minded Christians, and so we saw there was a real need for those who there are to get together. And so we try to bring together lifelong learners, people who are interested in potentially classical Christian education at some point in their lives, current classical school teachers, CC families, homeschoolers, all kinds of folks, because a lot of people know a little bit about this and a little bit about that, and we all have things to teach one another. And as we all know, learning together in community is just the best way to do it. Whether it's a CC community or another kind of community, we need that to learn well.
Yeah, as you've been going through this process, being part of the Classical Conversations multimedia team and Circe's master teacher program, what are some of those like core principles or core ideas that you wish like homeschooling parents or classical educators would focus on more closely, and how they could maybe de-stress their lives?
Yeah, de-stress. That would be a lovely goal. Not as easy to do as it is to say, I'm afraid. I think it's important to keep first things first. I would say that's maybe the best piece of advice that as parents and educators, the list of to-dos and desired outcomes and possible opportunities is longer than your arm, and it's really easy to get bogged down chasing this or that or the other thing because they are good things, but they might not be the most important things. So as parents, we have been given our children in trust by God, and He has purposes for them that we need to be pursuing that are probably more important than exactly what extracurricular activity they're signed up for, or how many of the books they read this year of the list that you want them to. Um, sometimes the more important lessons are, how do you love your neighbor, or how do you get involved in your community's life, or how do you care for your parents. As a parent, caring for your parents in front of your children is super important. You show them how to honor their parents by living it out in front of them. So, homeschooling parents have the best job and also the hardest job, all rolled up in one. That we get to live life in front of our children. They see us living it out, sort of warts and all. But in doing so, they get exposed to a lot of really, really important life lessons that are more important than whether they get through calculus or not by the time they're done with high school.
Yeah, so one of the unique things that classical conversations and our kind of in our vision is really just helping homeschooling parents. So and you mentioned, loving our neighbor well and those things. So as you're, guiding curriculum choices or helping to write curriculum, like what are some of those things that you take into consideration that maybe a curriculum writer at, a billion-dollar for-profit, publicly traded company that's selling to public schools might not consider when writing their curriculum?
Well, as Christians and classicists, it's sort of a two-part thing. They go together. Some people would try and drive a wedge between the two, but you don't need to. And in fact, I would argue in some ways you can't, because the classicists would say that what we're trying to do in educating our children is to make them more human, or more successful humans, or more fully formed humans. And as Christians, we say, yes, 100% agree. It's just that to be fully human is to be like the one who made us, because he put his image on
Mhm.
us. We're image bearers of our maker. And so to be Christ-like is to be fully human. That's what we're doing here, is trying to help our children love the Lord and follow after him, desire to be like him. Uh, and so so that's got to be, that's first and foremost in CC's life. As our mission is to know God and to make him known, and our curriculum has to follow after that. If it's so busy worrying about academics that it loses sight of that core principle, then then it's disconnected from our mission, or it's at odds with what we're doing with the whole child, the whole person that needs to be educated.
Now we're launching this new material, Reasoning Together Philosophy. So tell us, like, what was something surprising that you learned through this process, uh, creating a material from scratch?
Well, trying to write an introduction to something that is as profound and far-reaching as philosophy was pretty intimidating. Uh, when you're trying to follow in the footsteps of great thinkers, uh, it, just to make the judgment call of which ones to include and which ones not to include feels pretty weighty. um,
Yeah.
Go back all the way to the ancient Greeks, to read what Plato wrote about Socrates, and to read the great sort of scientific works of Aristotle, and
Mhm.
to fast forward through the thousands of years that have come in between, and all those who have written and thought about the things that they wrote and thought about, um, and then to try to bring it to the place where a 17-year-old, 16-year-old can sit down and read it and engage with it, and then prepare to talk about it, is a lot. It's a lot for them, but
Mm.
it's a really doable thing, which I'm very excited about in this book. That while it's a big ask, it's not a small book. It's certainly not a children's book in any way. It's a very adult book, but it's not too hard. It's not a thing that's going to be such a frustration for students that they can't possibly dive into it and come away with important issues to talk about, and even, I hope, sort of life altering realizations. Not because of anything that I wrote in the book, by the way. I did write parts of it to introduce things, but because they're encountering the actual words of great thinkers. So they're going to have some that are going to challenge them in some ways that they should know are out in the world, but shouldn't be part of their thinking on a regular basis. They'll read Machiavelli, and I don't think you can understand world governments today without understanding what Machiavelli was talking about when he wrote. But that's counterbalanced with other really important men of faith. There's one chapter in the book where the students will read both Descartes, who was writing in the 17th century. He's a French mathematician. Uh, he was a deep thinker, and he maybe not intentionally, but unintentionally opened the door to nominalism and materialism that's flourished ever since his day. But that's balanced against the other half of that chapter, which is Blaise Pascal's writing. And Pascal was also a French mathematician living just in another part of the country at the same time, who wrestled with some of the same thoughts and came away saying, it's not I think, therefore I am. It's God spoke, therefore it is. And I can't wholly understand that. And I need to enjoy that fact that things are bigger than I am, instead of trying to reduce it to something that I can understand. So the book is full of good things that will stretch any reader, not just a 16 or 17-year-old. They stretch me every time I go back and revisit the writings in the book.
As you were like putting this together for us, there's other philosophy books out there. Like, what are some of the differentiators in this? Like, why write another one? We do at Classical Conversations is curate curriculum, and sometimes that's curating others, and sometimes that's writing our own and curating from original source documents for our students. So yeah, so why another philosophy book?
Yeah. That's a good question. There are a million and one philosophy books on the market, and some of them are very good. I was inspired by some of the authors who've written about philosophy, or written some curricula even about philosophy that are on the market. This one particularly suits our needs for a couple of reasons. First, it does emphasize the place of faith as working in conjunction with philosophy. That a lot of the modern philosophy books, they totally segregate the two things. Right? There's either rational thinking in philosophy, or there's faith, and we won't let the two things mix. And we don't believe that. We believe that faith and reason hold hands, that they're not separate things. And so the book begins with the words of Scripture, and it ends with some important exhortation from Dorothy Sayers and Tony Esolen, who are both 20th century Christian deep thinkers who encourage students in how they should be living their life now, based on being people of reason and faith. And so there's that piece, and also the scope of it. We have a certain amount of time in a semester that we expect our students to engage with this resource and to be in community, to talk with one another about it. And so it's sort of the right size for our students, as well as being the right content.
Now, obviously, there's a lot on philosophy out there. We've got a big focus of STEM here in the United States, and engineering and math. And some people would say, like, why should high school students even bother with philosophy. They're just gonna go get a job and do what their boss tells them to do. So why do we even have philosophy as part of our strands and work that we have our students do?
Yeah. Well, I think there's many reasons for it. Can highlight two of them. One, I think I think we're seeing some interesting fruit of the STEM push, as a lot of those who were on the forefront of riding that wave and are now arriving at this era of AI are are in essence working themselves out of a job, right? Uh, there are no more entry level coding positions because AI is doing all the entry level coding for anyone who wants it done. And so I think the STEM emphasis all on its own is showing itself to be short lived, and maybe the end of it is already in sight. Um, being on the cutting edge of technology is always a very dangerous place to be, because if you're on the cutting edge today, you're obsolete in a week or two or a month or three. Um, but if you're knowledgeable about what it means to be human, to understand how humans work and think and always have for thousands of years, that doesn't become obsolete because we aren't obsolete. We are, right. We're living examples of that thing. Um, so there's that piece, and the other piece is that philosophy has gotten kind of a bad rap over the last 70 years as being not useful. It's something that a bunch of navel gazers sit around doing, and that's about it. Uh, but philosophy is around us all the time. It's woven through culture and it shapes culture. And so, even though people may not talk about it as philosophy, their lives are steeped in it. So, being forewarned is being forearmed, giving our students that ability to know that philosophy isn't just the words on the page of some dusty old tome that sits around on a shelf somewhere, but uh, it's in the advertisements that they see and hear. It's on the internet that they're looking at all the time. It surrounds them, and that the ideas that they're going to encounter in their lives in college, they're presented as shiny, brand new ideas. But the fact of the matter, there's nothing new under the sun. There are old ideas that are just coming back repackaged with new names or new slant on them. Uh, and so our students will be better prepared for life, better uh, inoculated against sort of the viruses of bad philosophy that come around and
Woke
around.
mind virus. Just say it, Timothy. The
Yeah,
woke mind virus.
yeah. Well, that might be one of them for sure.
The classical learning cohort is comprised of small groups of CC parents learning how to become more confident, competent classical teachers. We provide a welcoming place of mentorship while practicing classical skills and hospitable assessment. With feedback from peers and mentors, you will experience transformational growth as a classical Christian educator. Why not sample the CLC by attending a free online event with a CLC member? Go to classicalconversations.com/cohort and search Experience a CLC event to find a time that fits your schedule.
As the student finishes this up, like, what are your hopes and dreams for them? Like, what are you thinking that their takeaways are going to be, and what type of conversations are they going to be having with their families and their peers?
Yeah, one of the things I've encouraged students and families to do with this book is to read parts of it aloud and to do it together as a family or with siblings, to get together to read it with friends. Maybe not the whole book; it's kind of long to sit around and read that way. But there are parts of it that are really powerful and important. There are big ideas in it. So I hope that parents and students, this will be an open door to have some of the kinds of conversations that are otherwise a little difficult to have. There's a whole chapter on friendship. What does it mean to be a friend? What kind of friends should you have? That we live in a culture that wrestles mightily with loneliness in this day and age. We have people cutting one another off and calling them toxic or narcissistic and saying you're not worth my time. I don't want to have anything to do with you. It's a good question to ask. Well, when is that the right thing to do, and when isn't it the right thing to do? When is it right to get involved with that kind of person in the first place? Maybe you should have made a better choice for your friends. And again, 17-year-olds, they all have friends, and they've probably by now had some challenging relationship moments. So having that kind of conversation with their friends and then with their parents, who can say, yeah, I remember when I had a friend who did something similar, or why is it that this one friend stuck around for life, whereas these other friends sort of faded away and disappeared? Those are important life conversations, contemplations that we all ought to have. The oracle at Delphi, over the door, it says, or it said, when it existed, know thyself. And Socrates took that and expanded it out to say that the unexamined life isn't worth living. This book, I hope, for those who maybe aren't already having some of those big thoughts, it will start to open some of those doors so that they can begin thinking about what life means and why they're making the choices they make, or should they make those choices before something big comes along and sort of bites them because they weren't examining their life.
Yeah, you've told us a little bit about the chapters and some of the things in it. Like, is it divided up? Tell us a little bit about the kind of the details. Is there one running theme through it, or do they explore different themes throughout the year? Tell us a little bit about some of those philosophical ideas that they're going to be wrestling with during that year or semester.
Yeah, it's a both and there. The excerpts are paired, so there's two authors, two readings for each week of the semester. Really, the overarching question, because it's the question philosophers have been asking since before Socrates, is what is the good life, right? What does it mean to have a good life, and how do we get there? As Christians, we have the added layer of knowing that our life is not just sort of from birth to our physical death, and that's part of the theme of the book too. That we don't, as believers, we don't live in light of just this world. We live in light of the next. So that's the sort of the overarching theme. That's what's woven throughout the book. But each individual chapter will have questions like, what is the proper role of government? Something that we need to be really aware of, and is an open question in our day and age. There's questions like, is it better to be born in the era that you're born in, or is it something that you sort of missed the boat because you weren't born in the Middle Ages or in ancient Greece? How do we learn from books? How do we know what's true? Which is a really big question.
Yeah.
There's a reading from St. Basil about why we should read the pagan writings of men who didn't know Jesus, and we can still learn things from them. Well, we can't get the whole truth from them, but there are things that they've observed that are true. So yeah, there's a lot of different ideas in the book that they'll encounter, and some of them will really resonate strongly with some students, and others maybe won't be the thing that is their cup of tea, but they should still be challenged by the ideas every week.
Now, as we continue to improve our curriculum and work on new things, when Lee first started writing, my mom, classical education was just kind of in that beginning renewal process. So, and you've been with us now for a little bit of time, and it was called the Lost Tools of Learning, or it's been titled the Lost Tools of Learning. So, like, what are some of these tools now? Like, have we discovered all of them? Are we just days smarter than we were 20 years ago, or do you feel like we've been making a lot of progress on these? And what are some of those key ideas?
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. C.S. Lewis talked about the fact that sometimes the progressive route is actually to repent, turn around, and go back until you find the right path, and that's the fastest way to move forward, is to go back to something. There are some areas of classical education that we don't have that far to go back to. 100 years, and we can probably find some good things. There are other parts of classical education, and we're still digging back into more ancient history than that. I do love it that what we are doing is called a renewal. That it's not we're not trying to recreate and relive exactly what education looked like at any one moment in the past, right? We aren't trying to live the education that Socrates was giving to Plato. We aren't trying to live the education that Quintilian argued for, or Cicero, or any of the great pedagogues of the past. They lived in an era of their own. So we were digging back to discover the best of what has been known and practiced throughout history, and trying to piece it together. And that's a big challenge.
Yeah.
It's hard to grasp on that sort of theory sense. It's even harder to do in a practical, in a pragmatic, day by day setting. I tend to live on that theory side. I love to read about it. I love to discover about it. I like to think about it. But helping that idea to meet sort of the road, to hit it and get at it, and what do you do day by day? That's why I'm really thankful that we have such a great team around us. As I as I have sort of big pie in the sky ideas about things, I'm glad to have people, frankly, like Lee, like your mom, who she has such a great vision for how do you bring things to mom at home with her kids, that you don't need a PhD to do it, but you can do it well, and you can prosper your family. So digging back, you asked, have we found all the tools? No, there's still so much to learn, and I think we're only just starting to get started on how do we do math education and science education the way that people did it before the textbook era, because all of us are products of the textbook era. So digging back to the day when it was the amateur, right? The person who did it because they loved to do it, because they were exploring the nature of the world around them and applying logic and reason to plumb the depths of creation. That's a beautiful thing, and I think we're still wrestling with how to do that well and how to inspire our children and equip them. But we've come a long way. We're certainly a lot clearer and a little better at the practice of it than we were 20 years ago, I believe. But man, this generations and generations of work yet to be done to keep doing it and doing it well.
No, absolutely. I mean, we talk about how do we support our grandchildren and our great grandchildren in the future, and that we have a vision for, just beyond our own kids. So speaking of kids, you've got 4 proteges. Your dad, I know that, and I mean, obviously you're highly involved in their education and their equipping, and as part of your role at Classical Conversations. But maybe give some advice to dads who might be listening in. What are some of the ways, before, you started working for us, how did you engage in the homeschooling journey? And, what are some things that dads can be doing now?
Yeah. It is hard, as dad, if you're full-time employed, and especially if you're out of the house all day, coming home by then the kids are a little bit brain fried because they've been doing school with mom at home, and you're tired. But that's precious cargo, those children. Um, for me, a big entry point to making sure that I stayed involved with them and had things to talk about, that I didn't have to ask what they did with mom all day, um, because I would read good books to them. I picked a book and we'd read aloud, and I'd use that as an entry point for some good conversations. We'd ask, whether that character did the right thing or not, and how maybe they've encountered some hard choices like that in their lives. Even as younger kids, they would be able to relate to some of the things in the books that we'd read. um, I always enjoyed reading their papers, especially those IEW papers where they add all the dress ups and these sort of florid little papers that aren't about much of anything, but man, they love to show off all the sort of the twirly the twirly bits that they added on that made it often really funny, as well as informative, because that's what it's supposed to be. But yeah, I mean, asking to see what they're doing, and encouraging them that you know that they're learning and growing toward beautiful and good things. That have they arrived? No. The IEW paper or that first Lost Tools essay that sounds like it came straight out of a repetition machine. That's not the end. That's a step on a long journey. But that they're becoming better thinkers, better writers, better humans, just better communicators, because they're practicing the things that they're practicing, um, and that you're proud of that hard work that they're doing. Because as a dad, one of the things I want most for my kids is that they walk away from my home knowing how to work hard, right? To have the self-discipline to value that, uh, and that sometimes all you get out of a long day's work is the satisfaction of knowing that you worked hard at it, even if there's not a whole lot of product at the end of your day. So being able to value the hard work, as a dad, to give that to your kids is really important.
Well, awesome. Well, yeah, so we're really excited about Reasoning Together Philosophy, and hopefully it will help your kids know that a good day's work is worth it in and of itself. So, yeah, just give us one final plug, Timothy, on why people should buy it, what age or grade or challenge level it's for, depending on everyone who's listening, so they know. And yeah, just tell us if there's a way to get in contact with you if they want to know more.
Sure. So it's a pretty big book, 450 pages or so long. It's going to be produced. It's the first book that CC's making in hardback of this kind. That'll because it's something that's worth keeping. It's something that we really want Challenge 3 students, families, to keep on the bookshelf. It shouldn't be the sort of thing that you get done with your Challenge 3 year and turn around and sell on Facebook Marketplace or or ship off to the used bookstore and say we're done with that. Good riddance. It's something I'm really quite proud of that we have as Classical Conversations, and it's coming to you commended to you by Dr. Peter Kraft up at Boston College, who's a noted scholar in the realm of Christian philosophy. He reviewed it for us, and there's a good commendation right in the front of the book for students to encourage them to apply themselves diligently to this study, and that he approves of this book. So I hope that our families will also. We designed it. It's a beautiful book, and we designed it to be useful to students. So it's not just some idea-filled book, but it's very practical. The even the page design is such that it's got space for it to be written in. We want it to be customizable. We want students to interact with the text, to write in it, to ask their questions as they go, to highlight things that are important, that'll stick with them and that they want to come back to. Not just things that they're going to come and talk about in community one week, but maybe something that they'll see sort of in their mind's eye in another year. If they're off at a college visit and they think, you know what, I need to go back and remember what it is that we read about friendship as I'm looking forward to how do I make friends in college, and maybe which group of boys or girls do I really want to take up with when I get there. We want this to not just be some one-time resource, but a lifetime companion that students and families will pick up this time, but not want to put down when they're done with it.
Well, I'm excited for it. I'm glad my kids are young enough to get to go through it in the near future, or not too near future, I guess. They're still pretty young. But yeah, Reasoning Together Philosophy, go to classicalconversationsbooks.com. Go check it out. Timothy Knott's the main author behind that, and he's working really hard to make the challenge curriculum amazing and continuing to build on the great work of the past. So thank you so much, Tim, for being on the show today.
Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening in to today's episode of Refining Rhetoric. Definitely, if you have a 17 or 18-year-old or know someone who does, pass this episode on to them, and be on the lookout at classicalconversationsbooks.com and order your copy today. God bless, and see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortons. Want more? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media to continue the conversation, and visit classicalconversations.com/rhetoric to find out how you can join a local homeschool community.